Good afternoon. Hello, I'm Charlotte, Campaigns Director here at 38 Degrees. Welcome to the fourth instalment of our special Brexit live discussions. Thousands of people from all over the country have been sending in their questions to us about the issues that matter to them when it comes to Brexit, and we've been putting them to experts to really try and cut through all of the noise, all of the news, and separate the facts from the fiction. Today, we'll be discussing jobs and the economy. What does Brexit mean for us on that front? I'm joined once again by Jonathan Portes, Professor of Economics and Public Policy at King's College in London and Fellow of UK in a Changing Europe. So, all-round Brexit expert. Lucky you. Welcome back, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Earlier this week, you joined us to talk about immigration. Today, we're going to be talking about what's hot in the news today, jobs and the economy. What does Brexit mean? There's lots of different vying ideas and understandings. We'll be taking your questions as we go, so please do keep sending them in through our Facebook channel. Let's kick off with the news that's out today. As you can see, the Governor of the Bank of England made an announcement about the way in which Brexit would play for money in our pockets, for house prices, for the kind of value of the pound. It's been very controversially received, and we've seen even the Chancellor and the Prime Minister disagreeing about what he said. What's your take? Who should we believe?
Well, I think, step back a bit from what the bank said. There were two reports out yesterday, and it's quite understandable people should be confused because they were both from the government, as it were, and they both talked about Brexit and both looked at some of the same things, but they were quite different exercises. So let me explain what they were. The first one was from the government itself, so by a team of economists from the Treasury, from the Department for Exiting the European Union and so on, looking at the long-term impact of different type of Brexit deals on the economy. So they looked at the impact of a no-deal Brexit in the long term, not the short term, and I'll come to that later, in the long term, and also they looked at the impact of something that looks quite a lot like Theresa May's Brexit deal.
Okay.
And what they found was that, surprise, surprise, both of those scenarios would make us poorer than we would otherwise have been, but no deal would be considerably worse. So to give you some idea, they found that Theresa May's deal would, in the long run, cost us about 2 to 4% of GDP. That is, in terms of the average in terms of sort of the average amount that a person in this country produces. On average, our GDP per head, the amount we produce per head, is about £30,000. So you're talking about £600 or a bit, or £600 to £1,000 off GDP per head as a result of Theresa May's deal, in contrast to a no deal, which would cost us quite a lot more, maybe 8 or 10% of GDP, and correspondingly more per head.
So just to say that back to you, so the kind of experts from the government, from the Treasury, when they looked at what would this mean for people's kind of personal incomes, for GDP, under the deal that Theresa May has negotiated, people would find themselves a little bit poorer, a couple of £100 personally for the average individual. Under the prospects of a no deal, as best as they could forecast, that would be worsened.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. But, and it's important, and this relates to what your quote about what Theresa May actually said, this is not suddenly we find ourselves X £100 worse off, or the economy this much smaller. This is very much about what happens in the long term. Okay. And in the long term, lots of other things change. And in particular, in the long term, unless history, unless something really, really bad happens, the UK economy grows a bit every year, just naturally, and it would grow. So what this actually means in practice is that we would grow slower than we would otherwise have done. So it will cost us money, but that doesn't mean we will in 20 years be poorer. So, I mean, it's the
rate of prosperity.
It's the rate at which we grow. I mean, it's like me saying to one of you kids around the table, well, look, in 10 years, you'll be earning more than you are now because you're going to be older and more experienced, and you'll have better jobs, or at least better paying jobs, in all likelihood. But if Brexit happens, you won't be doing as well as you would otherwise have been doing. So that's what this report is saying. It's not saying you're going to be poor in 10 years. Unless something goes wrong, you won't be. But you will not. You will be poorer than you would have been had we remained in the EU. So that's what Theresa May was trying to say. It's a bit of a slippery issue saying, oh, Brexit won't make you poor. Well, Brexit will make you poorer, but it won't mean that you will actually be poorer because other things will happen as well.
a complicated point, but I think our viewers probably understand what you're getting at there. When you say they were talking about kind of the longer term, is there a sense of the time frame that the reports were addressing?
We're talking about 10 to 15 years. That's what we mean by the long term. It's basically when, and this is when leads us nicely onto the Bank of England report, which is much more about the short term. It's basically when everything sort of adjusted, the economy settled down, it's dealt with all the transitional issues, the adjustments, we've changed our patterns of economic behaviour and trade and so on.
Brexit isn't still dominating the
Brexit is still not, well, let's hope not. Whereas the Bank of England report is a very, very different, although it's again about the economics of Brexit, it's quite a different analysis, and it's for a very different purpose. And in particular, the Bank of England report isn't really, and it's been quite badly reported in this sense, it's not really that the bank is saying this is what will, it's not the government report is saying this is what we expect to happen, this is our best guess of what will happen as a result of Brexit. The bank report isn't saying this is our best guess. The bank is saying our job is basically, in this context, is to stop the financial system blowing apart. So what's the worst that could happen if we have a no-deal Brexit? What's the worst case scenario? And can we be sure in that worst case scenario that the whole financial system doesn't blow up? So when the Bank of England says that
no-deal Brexit would mean the worst crash since the 1930s.
It's not really saying it would be. It's saying
it could be.
It's saying it could be if you make all under a worst-case scenario, and if it were, this is what it would look like, and this is how we would cope with that. So, just as you would hope that, when your local hospital plans for a flu epidemic and an outbreak of measles at the same time. That doesn't mean it thinks it's going to happen. It just thinks it would be wise to be prepared for those things. And hopefully this won't happen. The bank is putting numbers on these things, but these are, it really is hopefully a sort of worst case scenario.
That's a really helpful summary of the two big reports that have been making headlines today.